Welcome to Boxing During Dinner, episode 39. Can't believe it's almost 40. Ridiculous. But for episode 39, we wanted to do something special. We've been working on some things, David being in Rochester and all. So David has a really special segment for you right now from Rochester. David, please tell us what you have for us.
Tonight, we're going to take you into the mind of a Boxing During Dinner host. Again. Tonight, we're going to take you into the mind of a Boxing During Dinner host. Shit.
Wow, that was awkward. That was almost as awkward as Chuck Giampa Friday on ShoBox. What was that about, man? I couldn't help but feel bad for Chuck Giampa. You know, I come from a TV background. I've been on both sides of the camera, behind the scenes, and it's tough for producers. It's tough for the host. Somebody screwed up there. I don't know if it was Giampa's nerves or if a producer screwed up, but it looked really awkward. I mean, Harold Letterman is so much better at this. I mean, he's been doing it for a while, but you gotta love Harold. I don't think Harold would ever say shit on TV on HBO. But David, what did you think of this whole Chuck Giampa debacle? You think they'll bring him back on ShoBox next time?
So my thoughts on Chuck Giampa. I think he's going to keep his job, to be honest, Armando, because if you look at everything else that went wrong in that telecast over this weekend, he can hardly be held responsible. Chances are it's the producer who's probably going to be in a world of hot water. In fact, I even suggested to you that with the way that producer's show went off or didn't go off, that I think you might have an opportunity to apply and be a part of the ShoBox crew. What do you think, Armando? I think you should go for that. But yeah, we've got a lot to talk about in boxing this week. Let's pick it up.
So yeah, David, obviously this was on the Guillermo Rigondeaux Rico Ramos fight. One of the worst title fights I've seen in a while. The champion, quote-unquote champion, Rico Ramos comes into this fight and he was just garbage. I think he's probably the worst champion I've ever seen in my entire life, because he wasn't throwing punches, he wasn't attacking. Rigondeaux had him out in the first round. He could have taken him out whenever. But here's my beef with Rigondeaux, David. Guillermo Rigondeaux is a great fighter. He really is. I mean, he's an Olympic champion, has over 400 amateur fights. But I remember years ago, and David, I remember you were at the card. Joey Hernandez was fighting Ed Paredes in the rematch. Rigondeaux was on the undercard. I remember talking to Freddie Roach, who was his trainer at the time. And Freddie, congratulations on your show on HBO, by the way. It was really awesome. It's good to see how you contributed to boxing. But I remember Freddie Roach, after the fight, I asked him, Freddie, these Cuban fighters come from this amateur mentality. They just throw punches, they try to land the points. How have you tried to change Guillermo Rigondeaux? Has it been a struggle? He told me that, yeah, it had been a struggle. That Guillermo Rigondeaux is a very hard power puncher. Could be one of the best power punchers in boxing. But it's a matter of getting in his head that this is a pro game, this is an amateur. So of course, Rigondeaux dumps Freddie Roach, goes on to Ronnie Shields, gets rid of Ronnie Shields, and now he's with Salas, the Cuban trainer. And this is my beef with the Cuban trainers. These Cuban trainers cannot train Cuban fighters because they're taking them back to the same crap, and to quote Chuck Giampa, to the same shit that they've been doing since the amateurs. In the round before the TKO, he told them to continue to do maniobras con los pies, to keep doing maneuvers with his feet. You win fight with your fists, not with your feet, at least in this case. He's not going away, he's not moving away from a power puncher. I mean, technically he is, but Rico Ramos wasn't throwing shit. He wasn't throwing punches, he was holding back. Rigondeaux could have knocked him out in the second round if he would have wanted to. He pressed the attack in that round to the disappointment of his trainer, because his trainer asked him to do the total opposite. Rigondeaux knocks him out, becomes WBA champion. But it's just crap, David, and these Cuban fighters need to get away from this amateur game if they really want to succeed in the pro game, because people don't want to pay to see that shit that Guillermo Rigondeaux pulled for 4 or 5 rounds.
You know, Armando, a lot of people have their thoughts on Rigondeaux right now because of this performance. I tend to think that in the right fight, Rigondeaux will fight. He's been tested against guys who are on the cusp of title contention, and now for the first time a full-fledged Titleist, which I'll get to in a second about how much of a champion Rico Ramos was. But Rigondeaux reminds me in a lot of ways of Floyd Mayweather, somebody who is capable of doing things that he's not displaying, but he's still winning fights, and people want to see a little bit more action. Granted, I'm with those people who want to see that. But Guillermo Rigondeaux is arguably one of the most talented fighters in all of boxing, and that was before he even slipped on professional gloves to enter the ring. But to your point, I think Rigondeaux can be more aggressive if he needs to be, but he has not found the opponents that have necessarily brought that out of him. He drops Ramos big time in the first round, knocks him out with his most underrated punch, which is that left shot to the liver for the body shot that ultimately ended the fight. I'm still high on Rigondeaux. He doesn't have a big enough name, though, to draw somebody like Nonito Donaire. Will he ever have that name by the time he's out of the sport? I don't know. He's a high-risk, low-reward type of fighter for people. But to your point about Ramos being the worst possible champion, I don't know. With the 5,000 title belts that are out there right now, I can certainly say Rico Ramos is among the bottom dwellers. I mean, he was totally getting blown out in his last fight until he came out with a punch of his life to finish, a 7th round knockout to claim the title belt in the first place. Is Ramos the worst? I don't think so, but I think he's among those who really never belonged in championship status. But he was, and that's something he'll always have for him going. But the point that you make about Cuban fighters going back to Cuban trainers, I will agree that pedigree is only going to keep these guys on the same plateau where they were with amateur fighters. And you said how Rigondeaux's trainer was telling him, move with your feet, move with your feet. You're not trying to, win an amateur type of fight. American fans, if Rigondeaux wants to step to that next elite level where he's a real crowd draw, then yeah, he needs to start, stepping up his output and things of that nature. But I think the opposite is true for fighters who were never part of the Cuban system, and you can say, Miguel Cotto is a most recent example of a guy who was working with professional trainers and then switched to an amateur trainer who maybe brought some new things into his game that probably showed, quite a change in his style against Margarito that made him, a really tough opponent in that fight. But I will agree that Cuban fighters, when they come to the United States, should not be training with other Cuban trainers. They need to learn a part of their game that they hadn't yet established, and maybe that's part of the problem right now with Rigondeaux.
So yeah, David, let's move away from this Guillermo Rigondeaux Rico Ramos fight. It's not worth it to talk about Ramos. But before we continue, I am eating Subway, and Alex, our cameraman, producer, editor, everything, he introduced me to this Italian cheese herb bread. It's really good. In the words of Chuck Giampa, it's a shit. It's delicious. I almost finished it before the show even started. Drinking some Coke, some polar bears there for Kira Mulvaney. And before I continue, I wanted to also, speaking of the Guillermo Rigondeaux fight, Alex and I were having a good time tweeting the fight with Jake Donovan from BoxingScene.com, to the Telemundo fight that was on, and also the ShoBox fight, and also the New York Knicks. Jake, if they fired D'Antoni and they hired Jeff Van Gundy, I promise you they'll be fine. But you know who they're going to hire? Isaiah Thomas. They're going to welcome him back. Exactly. Where's the Price is Right song? Boop, boop, boop. So yeah. So that's what I'm eating, and the Knicks must be eating not this, because they've been playing too shitty to be eating this delicious bread. Also, I had an allergy test done today. If you've ever had one of these done, it sucks, dude. Look at my arms. I feel like I got stung by like 20 bees. But on to boxing, man. Let's not waste any more time like ShoBox did, introducing their 8 announcers for a couple of fights. Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao, David. We're not overkilling this topic because this is the hot topic in boxing. They keep going back and forth. Floyd supposedly called Manny Pacquiao on the phone to talk about it. Talk about a possible fight. He said he will not take 50-50. David, I don't know how you feel about this, and I know the Manny Pacquiao fans are going to hate me, but it shouldn't be 50-50. Floyd Mayweather has been dominating the sport for a long time. So has Manny Pacquiao, you would say. But in their last fights, he struggled with Marquez. Mayweather didn't struggle with Ortiz. Mayweather's been in the division longer. Mayweather should get at least maybe 55-45. I don't think it should be that drastic of a difference, because Manny Pacquiao is over, I guess, he is the second best pound for pound fighter, not Amir Khan, like I previously stated in in Boxing During Dinner last year. But I do think Mayweather should get a little bit more than Pacquiao. And I don't know if they're going to fight or not, David, but I hope the fight gets done. If it's not for May or June, obviously not in June because Mayweather will be in jail, at least for November. Give the fans what they want. What do you think of this whole Floyd Mayweather thing?
Really, Armando? Italian cheese and herb bread and allergy shots? This is the best that you have for our fans? I'm going to stick to the fights. Let's get right to the other things that you were talking about. With Mayweather no longer taking 50-50. Now, I have been a Mayweather apologist for quite a while, and this time I can't defend what Mayweather's doing at this point. He's talking about how after all of these hoops that he wanted everything to go through, he seemed like he was doing everything possible to get this fight to happen. Now all of a sudden, even though the fight to me wasn't any closer to being done, he comes out in the 11th hour and says, no, 50-50 is no longer acceptable. Well, then what is? And why wasn't this brought up sooner? Now, I don't want to necessarily say there is also the rumor going around that perhaps Mayweather, somebody sent the email on his behalf and that he didn't send it himself. But then I'm also hearing Mayweather did indeed confirm that he will no longer accept a 50-50 split. This is now on Mayweather. Granted, the fight I don't think is going to happen either way. I don't think we're going to see it in December, as I've said all along. I don't think we're going to see this fight, period. This is now, a Mayweather falling. I don't think it's necessarily as much his fault because of the fact that Pacquiao hadn't really gone out of his way to make this fight happen either. The fact of the matter is, once again, 35-year-old, 33-year-old Mayweather and Pacquiao, respectively, are past their primes. They're still the best fighters in the sport, but this fight is already past its due date, and we're still not going to see it. And that's the unfortunate part of this.
So yeah, David, either way you put it, whether it's Mayweather, whether it's Pacquiao, your boy Cotto is going to get a big payday. He's going to get a big fight. I expect Cotto to fight either or of these guys. It makes more sense for him to fight Pacquiao since he is a top-ranked fighter. But Miguel Cotto is in for a huge payday and a chance to beat one of the top 2 fighters in the world, which, David, I'm sorry to tell you, he's not going to do it. It's not going to happen.
You knew I wouldn't pass up an opportunity to talk about Cotto. You're correct. And this is something I posted on the Boxing During Dinner Facebook page a little bit earlier. Who's the biggest winner in all of the Mayweather-Pacquiao drama right now is Miguel Cotto, because as of today, as we're shooting this episode, he seems to be the front-running opponent for either of those guys. And no matter what happens, whichever one he fights, he's going to get arguably the biggest payday of his career, because if he fights Pacquiao a second time, you know he'll demand more money than he did the first time. And if he fights Mayweather, I tend to think that because Cotto himself is the 3rd largest draw in all of boxing, that he can still draw more than he did when the first time he fought Pacquiao, if he were to fight Mayweather. So I think this is an awesome opportunity for Miguel Cotto. Do I think that he beats either of these guys? Let the fights happen, and I'll just leave my hopes and separate them from what reality may or may not be. He's younger than both guys, for whatever that's worth. It depends on the weight. Frankly, I think that makes a big difference. There's a better chance that Mayweather will fight Cotto at 150 or above, and the argument is that Pacquiao is not likely to face Cotto anywhere above 147. So to me, the best fight that he can make is with Floyd Mayweather. Whether or not that actually happens remains to be seen. But all the talk that we're hearing is that we're likely going to hear something within the week, and good kudos to Miguel Cotto, who's rebounded with 3 big wins, all by knockout. He's finally going to cash out, I think, in his last big payday against one of the 2 biggest stars in the sport.
But this weekend, no fights. We have Rashad Evans and Phil Davis in the UFC, but that's for later on UFC During Dinner, which hasn't been started yet. The following week, we have Julio Cesar Chavez against Marco Antonio Rubio, not to be confused with Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida. We also have Wilfredo Vasquez Jr. against Norino Donaire. If Donaire wins, he might fight Rigondeaux, who we spoke about earlier in Boxing During Dinner, Unboxing During Dinner. And it's Super Bowl weekend, and next week we'll go over the Chavez fight. We'll tell you our Super Bowl picks, but catch us at Box During Dinner on Twitter. Write us boxingduringdinner@gmail.com, and also find us on Facebook. Add us as a friend. Write to us. Give us suggestions, topics to talk about. We want to hear from you, the fans. We love talking to you, the fans. And Chuck Giampa, if you need some TV lessons, come here. I'll do my best to give you, show you the ropes that I guess they didn't show you over there in Showtime. But David from Rochester, I know it's cold up there, so I'll let you wrap it up, all right?
Like you said, Armando, that is a wrap. All of those social media sites that we're on, our website, boxingduringdinner.com. Stay tuned because we're going to start having some more new content on the site. Currently, you have access to all of our episodes, past and present, but we're also going to start adding a little bit more in the near future to make Boxing During Dinner as interactive as possible so that you guys can hear from us all week long. And please continue to tweet us your thoughts, Facebook, all that stuff, and we'll see you next week when we turn 4-0.